I will call this meeting of the Vergennes City Council, regular meeting to order, September 25th at 5:30. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I don't have any amendments to the agenda that I'm aware of. Okay. And I think I'll hold off. All of you are on the visitors list to say a few words to us, but I hold off until we make sure we have everybody here. Well, we may have everybody here. Do we know whether Jacob is not coming? He's definitely not coming. Okay, so then we're all set. So the situation that we have is that on the Recreation Committee, short version of the name of the committee, we wanted to have a student. And lo and behold, we have a lot more students interested in it than we thought we would have. So I think what we will do, I haven't heard anything from the council otherwise as far as having two students on instead of one. Since there are four of you, it could be two students as the primaries on there and two alternates. And the alternate will be for a particular primary. So if they're not around, then you're the meeting voter. But since these are all public meetings with the Recreation Committee, you are welcome to participate at all the meetings if you want to, regardless of whether you're the primary or not. The only difference it'll make is that at the time of some vote that the Recreation Committee has to make, then the primary is, if the primary is there, the primary is the one that's going to do the voting. Other than that, you can participate as much as you'd like. As a matter of fact, we'd like you to participate. So we'd like to take a few minutes and just hear a little bit from each of you. We've got Sierra, and we've got Anna and Summer, right? Okay. So whoever wants to go first, just tell us why you're interested in being on the Recreation Committee. It doesn't have to be long, and we'll go from there.
The reason I want to be on the Recreation Committee is I want to be able to give the Vergennes high school students and middle schoolers a voice on what they would like to see maybe go on or what they maybe want to happen around town.
I'll go next. I'm Anna Rakowski. I'm interested in being on the Recreation Committee to also give students a voice and to voice my opinion and the things that we're going to talk about and to just give some student opinion on the stuff.
So my name's Summer Chabot, and I'd like to be on the Recreation Committee because I grew up here, and throughout my years I've noticed different things, and I think that some of the things that I've noticed would be helpful to a committee to recognize and put in another student's voice.
It'll be the first on the agenda as far as nominating is concerned, and I'll give my suggestion as to how we deal with the who will be primary and who will be the alternate at that time. Okay, so we move on to approval of the minutes, sorry. So we have minutes of August 28th and September 11th.
I'll make the motion to approve both.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any alterations to either of these minutes?
I have a couple.
Okay, which one?
Starting on August 28th,
Okay.
appointment of aldermen. Third line, we'll give them each a few minutes to tell us about themselves.
I got that one too.
And then on the final page under South Water Street sidewalk, next to the last line, he advised the city council previously said they will not throw up the sidewalk. And I believe that was probably tear up.
Well, that's a figure of speech.
Well, okay. And that was all I had on that set. And then on September 11th, city manager's report, final paragraph, third line down. The auditors will be here next Tuesday. The revolving flashing beacons should be rapid flashing beacons.
That one too. And also, in the listing of people, it should be Brent Rakowski. Brent, right?
Oh, Brent.
Yeah.
And where was the flashing beacon? Under the city manager?
City manager's report, the second paragraph, third line down, first word, revolving. First word in the second paragraph. That was September
Okay,
11th.
I'm under the city manager's report.
That's where it is.
It is.
It's on the second paragraph, the third line down,
Yes.
first word.
Oh, okay. What should it be?
Rapid,
Rapid. Flashing? Oh, instead of revolving.
right.
Sorry.
And I have two, excuse me.
Oh, okay, you have some too.
Yep.
All right.
So this is September 11th, under visitors, two-thirds of the way down. New Haven is contributing $2,000. I believe that had been a request at that time of $2,000, and they had not committed. They have since committed, which is good news. But I think for the minutes, they were being asked to contribute $2,000. Yep. And then under city manager's report, fifth line, Supervisor Jim Lero told him that he was told by an alderman to remove a portion of the sidewalk. I don't think I indicated that it was an alderman specifically. I think I may have inferred. I did watch the minutes over again today, and I didn't actually.
Just plain, he was told to remove a
A portion of the sidewalk. Yes, please. That's it.
Okay, any other alterations from anyone? Okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed? Motion passes. Citizens' comments. Go right to it.
I have the floor. A couple of months ago, back in July, the end of July, we had kind of a national issue that came to everyone's attention. During one of the June meetings, I brought the issue up to this committee and asked what its stand was. And it resulted in an action item requested of me and accepted by the mayor to look into it. It has to do with fair and equitable treatment of personnel, in other words, an anti-discrimination based on political affiliation. The issue I'm referring to back in June is when our Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked to be removed with her family from a restaurant in DC because of her affiliation with the current president. And I asked the question, as it was proposed in the article, that since political affiliation is not a protected class under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where are the protections? Somebody walks into a restaurant with a Bernie shirt on, doesn't happen to coincide with the owner's political stand, and this individual, like Sarah, is escorted out. No standing before the court based on that. I mean, there could be a claim of gender discrimination or racial discrimination, but no safety, no protection under political affiliation under the Civil Rights Act. My question was then, and still is, has Vergennes looked into providing an ordinance and protection for people against discrimination based on their political affiliations, like Sarah Huckabee Sanders? And you took that as an action item. You said there was some issue with state law, Vermont statutes annotated, may have some issues with Vergennes creating its internal ordinance. Because I believe my comment to you was, unless a municipality carries on its books an ordinance that specifically makes illegal discrimination based on political affiliation, there's no standing before the courts. So you said, let me look into that. So my first question
I
is...
apologize because I have it in my notes, but I have not been able to look it up. And as
Okay.
I said back then, Vermont is a state where we can only do things as specifically given permission by the legislature for us to do. So we're not an enabling state where a local municipality can just decide certain things and it doesn't necessarily have to be in state law. So I will get to it and look that up for you to see whether we can even legally do it in the state of Vermont.
Okay, my understanding from my own research indicates that as long as the municipality's ordinance doesn't override or circumvent a state statute, then it's, especially in this case here where we're talking about equal protection under the law, it would be endorsed. That's something that you can look into.
I don't believe so in Vermont, but
Okay.
in other states that is true.
My research may have been more global than just Vermont. So my second question is, okay, you're going to look into this and see and put a dot at the end of this sentence so we can understand just what equal protection everybody can expect in Vergennes. Okay, I mean, we've already done the police fair and equitable policing thing that covers certain splinter groups, but it doesn't cover, I mean, it was designed and initiated to cover a specific group of folks who were here asking the city to do this. There wasn't any mandate, but it was something that was done to satisfy this particular real or imagined need. Point is, if you would look into that, I would appreciate it so we can put a dot at the end of the sentence.
Mhm.
And my other question, final question is, in your estimation, what does due process mean?
Procedural or substantive?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Procedural due process or substantive due process?
This would be procedural, under the law, procedural.
Do you want me to go first? Procedural due process is there are a series of rules or regulations or steps, and you follow those procedurally, that everybody is treated the same way. You don't skip over steps or annotate steps or ignore steps just because of certain instances. So a due process would be everybody goes through the same thing.
And that covers the presumption of innocence?
I would think so.
Of course. Yeah, where else would that presumption be, but under due process? If you look at what's going on these days, and this is the reason for me asking what this body, because I live in Vergennes, I need to understand what the mindset in Vergennes is, because I live here. Under due process, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. If you see what's going on lately in the news, there is a presumption of guilt based on accusation. Sad, and I just need to know that we're not thinking in that direction as a board.
Within a criminal investigation, yes. That's due process is criminal law, not civil job interviews.
Understand, but there are other items that cover that. So let's focus on the criminal aspect of due process. That's kind of where what I'm thinking of, because everybody in this room is subject to that type of criminalization based on accusation and no evidence.
Within that kind of court of law, then yes, that's what due process means. But if you're dealing with private individuals interacting with each other, constitutional law does not interact with individuals interacting with one another. It's what government does with citizens or people on soil, U.S. soil.
This would definitely
I know, I'm
be
just,
constitutional.
it just can get muddy if you start throwing around words and you're like, well, due process and, like individuals telling each other to turn down the noise from a neighborhood is not a breach of freedom of speech.
I understand.
But
That's correct.
yeah, so it's just important to make clear we're talking within a constitutional framework. You're talking about what government can do within the people who are on U.S. soil.
Well, that's why we have separate bodies. Yeah. Just wanted to bring that point up to see what you're thinking and to bring up my question again to the mayor. Thanks.
And I will get to it.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I have a suggestion. I think that, Mark, feel free to jump in. I think it's great having an attorney sitting at the table. I think that the answer to that question,
Which one?
the question relative to whether or not we could enact an ordinance, well, there's two issues. One is it's probably relatively complex. Number two is it could become fairly costly. And number three is it even something that we would choose to do? And so there's those other issues. But we have someone here who's brought it to our attention. And I appreciate you looking into it, but what I don't want to have happen is us go down a rabbit hole with it, which is what I could see occurring. So I think a suggestion that I would have is if we have someone here who's bringing an issue in front of us, from his perspective, there's a potential for there to be a problem there. I think maybe the thing to do is for you to appoint a very small committee to look into it and to come up with a suggestion relative to how to proceed, because I think that I think that looking at it is probably not a short answer relative to what could or could not be done. But I think that regardless of that, we ought to respond to his concern. And maybe the answer is not an ordinance. Maybe the answer is a resolution that we support the free exchange of ideas and speech and so on and so forth. Because when you undertake something like this, there's a lot of different factors involved. I mean, number one, I'd like to think that we have smart enough business owners to understand that it's not a good idea to be asking people to leave their establishments. I'd like to think that, and I think I'm correct. But it's relatively complex. So if it's a situation where we look into it and a determination is made that under the current state law, it's not within our purview to enact an ordinance, maybe there's another option to potentially address some of the concerns that he has. Because what I don't want to have happen is there was two things. One, I don't want it to just continue to sit there, and number two, I don't want to see us end up spending a lot of money unnecessarily, because it could get, I mean, Mark, would you agree that it could get fairly complex? The answer to that question?
It could get messy. I think
Sure.
I like the idea, but Brenda does the first part of the legwork and just comes back in a couple weeks and says, no, state law says specifically, boom, 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 we can't do it. We could always roll something else out, or you could say, I'm not really sure. Again, you could have a couple people go out and try and look at it, but I'd rather you just kind of see if you can find the initial yes/no answer.
I think the answer, or finding the answer to can we do it as a community separately, is a fairly easy answer to get. I just haven't had the opportunity to do the research to find out. And then,
The small group that you put together, what to do. You can't do this, or you could do,
Yeah,
yes.
the issue is this, is that, you know, whoever you call at the state level, I mean, Mark, you'll agree with me on this, the answer is always, it depends. And so, you know, there's a reason it's called the practice of law, and there's a reason that things are called an opinion. So,
You are going to the town
Anyway.
fair, and there will be people there who will have that kind of knowledge.
and the first people that I'm going to talk with is from our League of Cities and Towns, the legal staff. My guess is that a similar question has probably been asked someplace else in Vermont. They probably will have the answer immediately. It's just a matter of calling them. And if it doesn't, I'll do a little bit of research on myself, because I have a legal background also, and see what I can find.
We do have the advantage of being a small, compact state where we can communicate easily and freely and quickly in most cases. Somebody somewhere of the 650 of us must have asked this question or brought the issue up in one of our 251 communities somewhere. So it's probably already been addressed, answered, or put to bed, as the case may be. But if I can ask the question, certainly somebody else is going to be, and the last thing we want to do is have the issue brought forth by a disgruntled patron, only to find out, well, geez, you know, you don't have any standing, so stay out of Vergennes, or stay out of that restaurant, or change shirts, whatever, is my point. And so I appreciate your time and just dotting the I for us, you know, without getting wild and crazy about it. It's just a question that we should have an answer to.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, what I'm going to do is, we do have a public hearing that's coming up at 6 o'clock, so I'll move on to the first business item, which is the student nominees. And I might have to cut that in the middle of whatever we're doing to go to the public hearing. The public hearing should be very short. So I think we'll go to item 6A, which is appointment of student nominees to the Recreation Committee. So, council members, what is your pleasure?
Can I ask, are you all seniors? Are you juniors? I'm a freshman. We're sophomores. Okay, so you're all going to be there for a while. That's what I wanted to know.
Jacob is also a sophomore.
Okay, that's good.
And Jake is what?
He's 10.
So, okay. And I still consider, even though he wasn't able to make it because of the soccer game, I still consider he's one of the four in this whole thing.
He did say, he told me through email that his time would be limited because of soccer until the season's over, that after school weekdays, that's all there is. Which I'm sure, you know, we've got other things coming up. Did the four of you happen to be able to figure out if somebody has a preference as to whether they want to be primary or alternate?
I mean, I don't really have anything going on much after school
She's the least busy.
till November, and then, but also be able to be flexible then.
I don't have any preference.
Me neither.
So, do we want to do this by my lottery, or do we want to have the students confer with themselves and come up and just tell us?
Tell us what they want to do.
These folks are 1 and 2, and the other folks are the alternates for them.
And I think the way that this won't be an alternate like we have in a lot of the other committees where the alternate never does anything. You guys are busy. You do a lot of stuff. And there are going to be times when you can't make a meeting. And this way, at least a student voice is still there, which is really what we wanted. And the fact that there's 4 of you is overwhelming. I'm so glad that happened. But then it's like, oh, 4 people on it. So I think there'll be a lot of going back and forth. And especially for the first setup meeting, all 4 of you should be there, because it might be, well, everybody can only meet on a Tuesday night and only 2 of you can do that. That may become who the primaries are.
Is there any reason why we shouldn't appoint all 4 of them with the understanding that they won't always be at every single meeting, and then it's just simply done?
Well, I mean, that's a council decision. It's a council committee, so actually, the fact that you're willing to appoint 2 is a change of the committee charge, because it was initially a student. So I'm assuming that the council is in favor of adding the number, making the number larger. If you wanted to have 4 students on there, that's fine. It's your committee to have it any way you like. The only reason when I drew up the charge, I did it that way, I was trying to limit the number of people, because committees tend to work better when they're smaller, but it could be of any size.
How many people are on the committee? 5-year term.
Let's see. So we have, as originally proposed, it would be 1, 2, 3, 7. 7 originally.
The more members you have, the more likely you could potentially run into an issue relative to the quorum.
That's true.
Unless you set the rules in the beginning that says the voters present is a quorum.
And you can do that too. Yeah.
I mean, I would be in favor of 2 alternates, just because I don't like large, unwieldy committees, by definition.
You could have all 4 show up, and they have a total of 2 votes.
2 votes.
Sure, that works,
And your
too.
quorum is based on votes, not
Yeah.
bodies.
That works. Good idea.
Yeah. So we could,
Yes, no, yes, no.
we could appoint all 4. And, in the, you're convening the first meeting, so you can help to establish that there may be 4 present, but there are only 2 votes out of those 4. Whenever.
So I'll move that we appoint Sierra Bertrand, Anna Rakowski, Summer Chabot, and Jacob Kadric to the Recreation Committee with the power of 2 votes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. You're all
See, at
in.
least some members of your family are willing to step up to community service. I mean,
Would it be
Thank you.
possible for you to give Joan all your emails before you leave? That'd be great.
Okay. We're very close to the 6 o'clock time. I think I'm going to squeeze it and say it's 6 o'clock so I can get on with the public hearing. So I'll open the public hearing. A notice is hereby given to the residents of the city of Vergennes, owners of land within and the city and other interested persons and parties, that the city council will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, September 25th, 2018 at 6 p.m. Vergennes Fire Station Meeting Room, as required by 24 VSA Section 4442. The purpose of the public hearing is for the City Council to hear and receive testimony regarding the amendment to the land use map of the Vergennes zoning and subdivision regulations proposed by the Vergennes Planning Commission. Is there anyone who, after all of that, has any comment for the hearing? Seeing no comment, I have opened the meeting, the hearing, and I now close the hearing at 6:01. All right, we'll move on. 6B, Triangle Bike Loop Funding. And would you like to make a few comments on that?
I think, so just to refresh your memory, this is a municipal planning grant. It's a consortial grant. We would be going into this with the town of New Haven. It's a grant for up to $35,000, requires a 10% match. New Haven has approved $2,000, which means that what we're asking for is $1,500 from the city of Vergennes. It's a grant to draw up a master plan for what we're tentatively calling a triangle bike loop, which would connect Middlebury, Bristol, New Haven, and Vergennes. So it would sort of test out the proposed route. The route was proposed by a study that was done by a group of Middlebury College students in the spring. So it would test out this route, come up with some cost estimates for retrofitting that would be required, develop a plan for community engagement, and then hopefully open the door for further grant funding to take on some of the improvements that this study would recommend. So it's been approved in theory by the Planning Commission. It's consistent with our municipal development plan. It came out of the Walk Bike Council of Addison County, of which I'm also a member. I'm a member of the Planning Commission and the Walk Bike Council. And so it came out of the Walk Bike Council, and the Walk Bike Council would ensure continued momentum should the grant be approved. So.
If the council so chose, the allocation could be appropriated out of the Water Tower Fund based on the conditions.
I guess my only thought is Bristol and Middlebury sound like they're getting something for nothing, so to speak. Is there any plan on having them put their fair share in along the way?
Yeah, so the rules of this consortial grant say that they can't become co-applicants because Middlebury is already in the middle of another request and Bristol doesn't have a municipal plan. So what Vergennes would get that these other two towns wouldn't get is a position on, I don't know exactly what the name of this group would be, but there's a group that would then have a stronger voice in making decisions about what happens with this plan. Vergennes and New Haven would have a stronger voice in that process. It's a reasonable question.
And if I could also add, when it comes time to the implementation phase, then the restrictions go away, and they would be certainly asked to contribute at that point.
Yeah, basically, right now, they're just qualified.
Yes.
So I suppose they could make a contribution if they wanted to, but they're not qualified to participate in this grant.
Correct.
Do you know if they have general interest in it? If the $35,000 planning comes through and everything's great, and yes, we're going to go through with this, are they sort of like, yeah, this is a good idea?
Well, so the Walk Bike Council has membership deliberately from Middlebury and Bristol and Vergennes. And actually, when we were talking about this and trying to figure out how could Middlebury possibly participate given the requirements, we figured out that this couldn't happen, but the Safe Routes group in Middlebury wondered if they could contribute. So they can't because they can't be in this sort of a grant. But while we haven't gone to their select boards to ask specifically, there certainly is a strong membership in the council from both of those towns. Yeah.
Okay, so if we're going to proceed with funding a share of that, then I would need a motion that come out of the Water Tower Fund.
I will make said motion.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not opposed. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Exciting. I have a form. I don't know at what point I should get signatures.
Who has to sign the form?
A quorum of the city council, so I need a
We
bunch
happen
of
to have
signatures.
That is really unusual. A quorum.
Should I
Yeah,
Just start with David.
pass it around? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Item 6C, the Town Energy Planning Element Pilot. Shannon, would you like to further explain that one?
Sure. So what the Addison County Regional Planning Commission has is some state funding for energy and enhanced energy planning. This is something fairly new in the last 2 years or so, so the state is dangling it as a carrot. This is probably the last round that the region is going to have. They've already done about 6 other towns. So what it is allowing our municipal development plan to have an enhanced energy planning section that would give us better standing in Public Utility Commission hearings in the event of any energy projects going on within the city limits. At our public planning forum a couple of weeks ago, it was pretty universal. That was one of the areas where we achieved a fair amount of consensus and everybody thought it was a great idea for us to do this, especially since applying for this planning grant requires no matching investment. It's a freebie kind of thing. There's no guarantee that we will be selected one of the 3, but if we're authorized to sign a letter of intent, we go in and it would be decided next Tuesday. Ideally, well, normally the letter would only have to come from me as chair of the Planning Commission. I'm hoping to get extra leverage, if you will, by saying that, there's widespread support and that the City Council has authorized the mayor and myself to write this letter. So that's all that we're asking for.
Okay, so the letter was in your packet, so if you agree with that strategy, I guess a motion to...
Do you need a motion or just us saying, it's fine? Fair enough.
Okay. Okay. Anybody have any objection to us sending the letter?
I have no problem.
All right, we move on. We'll be sending the letter. Okay. All right. Item 6D, alternate to the Waste Management District. Yeah, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah.
Waste Management
I'm
District.
sorry, that should not say. Yes, it does. I'm sorry. That's correct.
That's fair.
Do we have anything?
So Mel was our representative previously. Obviously, with his retirement, he's vacated that position. And I suggest that I would be taking his place.
Okay, then.
I know what I'm asking for, yes.
Okay.
Part of the reason is, Rennie, as we talked, and I don't want to go too far off base, but there are changes coming to our recycling and trash removal initiatives in Vergennes, and I think it's important that we maintain a voice on that board.
Definitely. So I'll need a motion to appoint the city manager as the alternate to that board, Waste Management District Board.
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
That was Jeff who seconded.
Yeah.
So you can have the
Oh, we
seconder.
did? Oh, gosh.
No, we did it the same, but Jeff should have his own share. It shouldn't just become just Lowell and I going back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay, item 6E, discussion of VLCT draft municipal policy. I sent it to all of you earlier than the agenda because, as you saw, it is long. It covers many, many areas. The VLCT municipal policy, this is the guidance that our, I hate to use it with VLCT, our lobbyists who work in the legislature on behalf of all the cities and towns in Vermont. This is their guidance. This is what they go by in order to convince the legislature to go one way or the other on various issues that come up. And there are committees that of VLCT that come up with these, and then they go to the Board of VLCT as the proposed policy. I am on one of those committees, the Finance, Administration, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, otherwise known as the FAIR Committee. So when the town fair comes up in another few weeks, there's a time when we have to vote on all of these policies as to whether this is going to be the policy that VLCT uses. And so really, I should be reflecting what the city's standing is on these policies, not mine. It's not for me to decide, it's yours. And I know it's long, but if you have any place in here where you feel that something should be different, that doesn't mean that the group, which is quite a few people in the group, because it's all the membership of VLCT that are voting members, it doesn't mean that necessarily you'll get your way, but I can propose it. So is there anything in the policy that you've found that is particularly bothersome or you want to add? And if not, I guess I'll make educated guesses that this is where you're standing on various policies as we vote them.
Vote your conscience.
Let my conscience be my guide.
Freak me out.
No.
Is on the open meeting, public records, and election laws section.
Okay.
Number 6, allowing a gap day without early voting or new voter registrations on the day before election day. Is that how it currently is now? There's a gap, or is that proposed to make
There
a
is no
change?
gap day right now, right, Joan? Yeah. And I don't think that policy will be voted on because didn't we just change to make sure that you could go right up to election time?
Right, you can come to the
Right.
polls and register to vote and vote right on election
Yeah,
day.
and that was a relatively recent
That
change
was
to the
like
law.
within a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, so the likelihood that that piece would be voted the way it is, I think is highly unlikely.
It's a real hardship on
Right.
every clerk running the elections.
Right.
It's a nightmare.
It would be nice to have it, in other words, the gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Other clerks are shutting down the day before.
Mhm.
Anyways, they're doing it. It's like, there's no way they can run the election without shutting down. I mean, it's craziness. I mean, the day before, they'll be right at our office, right at 4:30, voting, and you have to have an absentee list to post, so now you gotta back up and do everything. It's crazy. But
This was probably put in by the Clerks Association, probably advocated it, that's why it's in the policy. But the law that requires or allows people to do everything right on voting day is a new law, so the likelihood that this is going to change, I don't think it's very likely, but that's what the policy is. Or that's what the guideline is anyhow for VLCT.
Yeah, right. Sure, and I completely can understand there must be logistically a lot of challenges with that. And I guess the question is, are we saying that this is a policy that we endorse as a council, or this is? I think that's kind of my question or my confusion on that.
Well, I guess if this comes up, and they all come up individually, by the way, that's why it takes us a long time to go through it. They all come up individually, and I can vote against it. And that would be reflecting, if that's the council's wishes, to not have it, or if it is the council's wishes to have it, then I vote for it. If you don't tell me anything, then I'll vote my conscience and where I think you're coming from. So it is really, all of these are supposed to be whatever the select board or the council of the particular community, it's really your decision. It's not an individual decision. It's a council decision, actually, how the voting goes. But as you can see, the policy is so extensive, it's hard for any body to go through all of these.
Sure.
So that means that if you have a concern about that, then you ought to voice your concern and see whether the council is standing in that same position, and that's the way I'll vote.
Sure. Yeah, I think, and absolutely understanding the position that all the clerks are in, I think seeing, a lot of places, not necessarily in Vermont, but people trying to make it harder to vote and get one's voice out there. When I remember that change was made, allowing, making it literally as easily as possible to vote in Vermont up to that very minute. I thought that was a strong policy and a strong stand. And so that's something that having a gap day, I don't necessarily agree with from that perspective. So.
And I would say let the law kind of figure itself out. It's just happened, and if it comes down a few years where it just becomes more problem than it's worth, then maybe we bring discussion. But to try and change it immediately after passing that is strange.
Yeah, and not very likely that will happen. Okay. I've heard enough. Anything else? Anything else in this? If not, we'll move on. All right. Item 6F, Downtown Basin Master Plan Task Force appointment. Let's see here. Does anybody have, right now we have, I think, only 2 people appointed, and were you the council member on this?
I would agree to do it.
Did we actually vote on you
No.
being a council member?
Have the 2 community members.
Yeah, and actually, when I proposed one of them, I really should have said that that person be the partnership representative, because Kathy Rossier is also on the Vergennes Partnership Board. So she probably should be the partnership slot instead of the general one, because if she was the general one, then the partnership would end up having 3 people, and I think that is more than there should be. So Kathy actually fills the one for one of the slots for the Vergennes Partnership, and then we have Mike Winslow in the citizen one. So we need 2 more citizen members, and we can vote Dave Austin as the council member 1, and then we'll just have to wait until the recreation facilities and the recreation committee convenes, because they need to have one of their members be on this task force. So with that, does anyone have anybody else other than appointing Dave to the committee? Next council meeting, think of a couple of names. We need two more.
So you're going to find another partnership? Or
Yeah, and another
float it in.
partnership, yeah.
So you get a partnership, and we need 2 community. And then the rec committee, when they meet, will select one of their own.
Yep.
What about somebody from the pool committee? That's meeting on Monday.
Well,
Is that necessarily
I
the
don't,
Basin?
because this is really the basin, so I don't see them having an active interest in that.
I mean, you could float, I mean, you can ask just as a general, does somebody,
If
because
they
they're
want to be,
community
I mean,
people,
if they feel there's
but I
some-
don't think there's a
if there's
connection.
if they feel there's some sort of connection, I mean, there's no problem with having more members on there. I mean, more ideas we get and more people to try and implement this, the better it is. Okay, so then I will need a motion to appoint Dave Austin as the council member.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. And we go to item 6G, appointment of trustee to Bixby Board. And did I get an email from you that, who did I get
Got
an
an
email
email
from
from
you?
me,
That's
yes.
right. That's in the process, right?
Yes, they're interviewing a finalist, and the board will be making a recommendation to us at our next meeting.
Okay, so we move on from that. City Managers Report, item 7.
Okay, good evening, thank you. Couple of just housekeeping items. We've got a firewall and switch replacement taking place in City Hall this Thursday and Friday. We anticipate 2 40-minute outages of our computer, our online ability, but this is required maintenance to get us get some dated equipment traded out. We're not anticipating any significant disruption to service in City Hall. Citizens Bank, potential change in bank for the city of Vergennes. Citizens Bank is currently our bank, and as we are all aware, they are leaving. I do have potential on there because they are extending an opportunity for us to be able to, do all of our banking online, which is not preferable. And Joan and I are in the process of meeting with other banks within our community. This is going to have to happen sooner rather than later, as we anticipate Citizens is done on the 16th of November, Joan? Okay, so what we need to do is we need to make a decision and then come to the council with our recommendation. The change to a new bank has to be approved by the city council, so we'll bring you our recommendation. Hopefully by our next meeting, if that goes according to plan. Thank you to Joan. Vergennes Race Day donation, Scott Gaines oversees the Vergennes Race Day, and they actually turned a small profit this year, some $627, I think. Scott and the race committee requested that $127 be reallocated back to additional signage materials for next year. And he suggests that the remaining $500 be donated to the Vergennes Area Rescue Squad, which I don't think we require any action on behalf of the council, but I think it's great that that team is able to give back some to our community. Budget report, kind of still 3 months in. There's not a significant amount of change. I will tell you guys, and I was glad to say to Lynn, Lynn pointed out a line item that is nearing 50% of their total annual budget. I've already communicated that back to the department head. Budget is something that is of utmost importance to me, and is something that I will be communicating on an as-needed basis, but at minimum once a month, we will be having department head meetings, and budget is a primary topic of conversation. But there's really, there are a couple of items that I'm watching, unfortunately in particular to the police department with overtime is already above 41%. And then some of his kind of discretionary uniforms and supplies are inching up there, and it's way too early in the season for him to, or the year rather, for him to be pushing those numbers up. So I will continue to watch and monitor that. On the budget as well, during my interview process with the City Council, there were some comments passed regarding budget reporting, and I would just ask offline if anybody is looking for any specific ways that they want to see the budget report sliced and diced. If you're not getting information that you feel is pertinent to help you with overseeing our citywide budget, I would encourage you to please let me know what you're missing or anything else in the report. I've kind of picked up where Mel left off, and I'm continuing to drive the bus kind of the way it had been. But if you're looking for something different, I would encourage you just to please communicate to me, and we'll see what we can do to accommodate those requests. That is really everything I have under my report this week.
Okay, thank you. Mayor's report, I only have one item, and that is to remind council members that tomorrow, the 22A truck route study public meeting is tomorrow in the Opera House at 7 p.m. And if you can make it, please do, and certainly talk it up amongst people around town, because it actually is important if a lot of people show up and give their input. VTrans ultimately, I know this is going to be a study and there's going to be recommendations from the study and so on, but ultimately VTrans is most responsive to things that get the public's attention. And so we need to make sure that we keep things cranking in Vergennes about this issue, because the more they hear from the public, the more they'll pay attention. And this is just the beginning of that process. And I think that VTrans is a little bit more towards this issue, because they're the ones that really initiated the funding of this, the consultant to do the study. We didn't ask them. They just decided that it's something that should be done. So I think we already have VTrans a little bit more on our side to begin with. But, so if you can show up for that, I'd appreciate it.
That's encouraging, considering the fact that they're the ones that created the issue back many years ago. And it's kind of like having the kid who was stealing from the lockers be the hall monitor. I want everybody to remember that they approved 22A as a truck route, irregardless of their own regulations. Their own regulations, which were, and standards which were in place at that particular time. What was it, around 20 years ago, 18 years ago, something like that. But the standards that were in place at that time, they overlooked a significant number of them with regard to making the determination that this stretch of road is a truck route. It doesn't meet, and I'm assuming the standards are probably still the same, but it did not and does not meet the standard relative to grade, radius of corners, population density, and a number of other things. So it's, I'm glad that they're headed in the right direction, but let's not give them too much credit because they created the issue.
Yeah, and what kind of stands out in that whole thing with the truck route is that, and I think I've mentioned this before, that the Opera House got an enhancement grant to help fix up the building. And an enhancement, it's extremely rare, if it's ever happened at all, that an enhancement grant from VTrans goes to a building. It went to a building because the truck traffic was doing so much damage from the vibration to the building that they gave that money to the city, and I think it was like $225,000. It wasn't a small amount of money. So way back early days, they recognized that the trucks were a problem. And I'm just hoping that we can move forward with all of this more quickly.
I'll just make a comment more than anything, because I don't know if I'll get there in time because I have an appointment, but I also want everyone to just think about every other town that's done a new route around their city and how much it hurt the downtown. You know, if they use an existing route, like just, I'm not saying 17 is the best one, but if they use 17, that's one thing. But if they come in and say, we're going to build a new bypass, not only does it take the trucks, but it takes every car, too, that doesn't particularly want to stop in Vergennes. Right now, they have to come through Vergennes. If there's a bypass, they don't have to anymore. So I just want that thought to be kept in mind, because I have a house on, Main Street, too, and we have to repair the bricks all the time. So, but at the same time, do we want to take all the traffic that stops for lunch or comes down to come to lunch and then say, well, I'm going to drive, or I'm going to walk down to Everywhere or Linda's or Sweet Charity or, whatever the store might be. Those cars may not be on Main Street anymore. So I want to just say that. And when Middlebury did their bypass, that's when all the stores went out downtown. And they've worked for years to get that back.
I would agree with Lynn. I mean, bypasses have been talked about in the city of Vergennes for at least 80 years. And Ronnie, you would remember we had a design charrette. Two, again, 20 years ago, someone. And there are issues with bypasses, and I think it would make sense for the council as a whole for us to take a position relative to this issue, because I am not convinced that it is incumbent on the city of Vergennes to provide ease of passage for truck traffic. I mean, and that's the issue, that's the has been the focus of this thing. I mean, if we wanted to decrease truck traffic, there were 20 some odd things that Terry and Gerald Weiss had come up with 20 some odd years ago that could be done to do two things: to discourage truck traffic through the center of our downtown, to increase pedestrian safety. And that document exists somewhere. You might even find it might be somewhere in your office.
I'll get to work on looking for that.
I've got one in my filing
I've got
cabinet,
one
and they'll never find it. But
Yeah.
the issue is that that when you talk about a bypass, you're dealing with exactly the issue that Lynn speaks of. And the other thing that you're dealing with is the type of development that occurs at the terminus on either end is not particularly desirable in this day and age. You get very, very typical suburban strip style build out at the terminus. And that was a concern back then. It's still a concern that I have, and it was certainly a concern for Panton at the time. So I think it would make sense. I mean, I'll certainly go to the meeting, and all of us can go and speak individually. But I think it would make sense for the council to take a position relative to this. And I would agree using an existing route. I would agree that increasing enforcement. I mean, at least there was a reason that they were using 22A, and it had to do with an increased level of enforcement in the I-87 corridor, at least for the traffic that was traveling from the Port of Albany to the Port of Montreal. And again, this is 20 years ago. I don't know the specifics. But anyway, for whatever that's worth.
Well,
We do have a brand new police truck designed to pull the trucks over. We could use it.
well, certainly you should express your feelings either at the meeting or by sending something into the engineers. I mean, this public meeting is really put on by Stantec, which is the company that was selected to do the study. And so they're just trying to collect information at this point before they start working on things and dealing with all the stats that much of which we've already collected about truck traffic. So tomorrow night.
It's on my calendar.
Anything else? If not,
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
he makes the motion to adjourn.
Second.
And it's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.